Session number 7, Software Updates. Today's objectives are to learn about software updates and learning about firmware management, loading, and configuration. The Centralized Software Update Service. Security products must be updated constantly to cope with the latest security threats. Software Update Service is provided by uploading a compressed firmware image file to the SMP database, making the image file available to gateways that are subscribed to the Software Update Service. Software Update Service provides latest product features, bug fixes, updated security policy, latest Smart Defense updates, user interface changes, and ADSL modem software updates, in ADSL models only, of course. Providing software updates. The procedure is as follows. Uploading firmware files to the SMP database, then enabling the firmware files in the plans and gateway objects, and configuring additional options like scheduling, concurrent downloads, limitations, etc. Managing the firmware database. This option is available via System and Firmware's page, where you can add, delete, and edit firmware TGZ files. The firmware types. There are at least 4 firmware types that are different for each appliance needed to be upgraded. For example, there are 4 generations of appliances, from the 100 series to the 100B, 200, 400, and 500 series. There are the DSL models, and there is the 1000N, each with its own generation or generic, generation 1, 2, 3, and 4. To download each firmware, you will need a valid Checkpoint software subscription contract. Firmware files can be uploaded directly to the database or fetched from the Checkpoint User Center via Smart Update. Firmware file versions can be assigned in the database in plans and gateway objects under file versions can be assigned in the database in plans and gateway objects under, whether it's in the plan or the gateway, of course, under firmware updates and then choosing the firmware option. Recommended. Let's use plans to apply a batch software updates process. This makes the whole procedure a lot faster and easier. Instead of updating one gateway at a time, you can just change the firmware in the plan and all the gateways will receive that plan the next time they phone home. Some considerations. Bandwidth. When large number of firmware files are downloaded at once, the bandwidth available for the SMP operation may be limited. So we have added an option in the SMP to limit the number of gateways that can be updated at a single time in terms of firmware updates. If you have a high bandwidth line, this is less of a consideration for you, but if you have a low bandwidth line, you must consider this option and reduce the number of gateways that can pull that information at the same time. Outage period. As you know, firmware updates requires the safe at office appliance to reboot to accept the change. This interrupts the customer's network operation. The following measures are recommended. The SMP allows you to schedule firmware downloads for a desired local date and time. Another option is to use the new 1000N series, where it takes approximately 20 to 30 seconds to reboot, then the outage time is a lot lower than in the older series where it took several minutes. Database maintenance. Firmware files take up disk space. Use the simple and intuitive SMP interface to manage firmware file database, whether it's to remove older firmwares that are no longer used or updating with new firmwares. How do we use the bandwidth control? Bandwidth control. Firmware files are between 6 and 12 megabytes in size. Too many concurrent downloads consume the SMP bandwidth, so we should limit the number of concurrent downloads from the system servers, and then we click on the name of the server, and then we can see this screen that we can, the default is concurrent download limit is 50, but we can limit it to any number, whether it's a higher number or a lower number. Again, lower bandwidth means lower number of concurrent downloads, higher bandwidth, higher number of concurrent downloads. Scheduling. Safe at office appliances must reboot for firmware update to take effect. This interrupts the daily office work. Schedule software updates for weekends or off hours. Very simple, very easy, very recommended. Database management. Too many firmware files in the database are difficult to track and manage, as well as taking up disk space. Select and trash unused firmware files. Thank you, everybody. This concludes session number 7. Please take the time and complete lab number 7 in book number 3. Please join us for session number 8, entitled Web Filtering.